Our next panel is Freeriders, Olympians, and Explorers taking on the climate challenge. Our moderator is Barney Swan from 2041 ClimateForce. He first launched after the completion of the first polar expedition to the South Pole, powered entirely by renewable energy. We also have Mario Molina, the Executive Director from Protect Our Winters, and he was previously the International Director of the Climate Reality Project, of which many of us are alumni, and Gretchen Bleiler. She is an Aspen local, a two-time Olympian and Olympic silver medalist, world superpipe champion, 4 times X Games gold medalist, and the co-founder of Alex Bottle, which I'm sure she'll tell you about.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Actually, we're going to change the format a little bit in good AREDAY style. I'd love to spend just a few minutes telling you about Protect Our Winters and what it is that we are doing. Just as an aside, I'm originally from Guatemala. I was born in Guatemala, but I'm a U.S. citizen by choice. Thanks for all of you who have been supporting the work that's going on at the border lately. Now, having said that, Protect Our Winters, we turn passionate outdoors people into effective climate outdoor advocates. And we're going to start with a short video that tells a little bit about how we're going to do this.
Nothing really compares to the true experience out here. Just climbing a 600-foot waterfall at 20,000 feet. Getting to see the sunrise over the roof of the world.
So if you think you've seen something good, take a look at this. Not bad. Some people call this fun.
Being in the mountains isn't comfortable, but that's what I love about it. A tiny figure in this massive landscape. That's when I feel the most alive.
At Protect Our Winters, we believe that that feeling that everyone in this room has right now can be catalyzed into purposeful action towards climate change. And we'd like to always start by thanking our sponsors. So I'd like to thank Chip and Sally, but most importantly, I'd like to thank Planet Earth, who is all of our sponsors. Now, as we all know, Planet Earth is going in a pretty powerful crisis, but it has a very significant impact for those of us who recreate outdoors. Last February, the Arctic experienced 2 temperature anomalies where the average temperature was at least 50 degrees above normal. That used to happen once every 10, 20, 50 years. We had 2 of those anomalies in a single winter. That has very strong, significant consequences for those of us that recreate outdoors. Basically, in the western US, that actually means a decrease in precipitation of up to 5%. And the 1 degree difference when we have temperature anomalies is the difference between getting precipitation as rain or getting precipitation as snow. For those of us who recreate out in the West, we know what that meant for us this last season. So at Protect Our Winters, we've trying to convey that message to the outdoor community, both the practitioners but also the industry, and convince the outdoor community that this is the apex issue of our time. In order to do so, earlier this year, we released an economic report that was picked up by over 500 media outlets, talking about what the consequences of a warmer winter are to the outdoor recreation community. We are overall an industry that generates 191,000 jobs and adds $11.4 billion to the national economy. That is only the snow sports industry. That does not take into consideration all of the other adventure and outdoor sports which amount almost to an $850 billion contribution to the economy. When we have a below average season, the average jobs lost are about 17,400 jobs, and the impact to that economy is about $1 billion. At Protect Our Winters, these kinds of figures are what we call speaking Republican. And what we're doing is we're framing this as a conflict between the past and the future. We all know that the future is what we've been talking about here, a renewable, low-carbon economy. Unfortunately, however, there are those representing the past who want to hamstring the progress and perpetuate unsustainable technologies. We have Scott Pruitt running the Environmental Protection Agency. We know what he's done in terms of rolling back climate regulations. We've got Rick Perry from Dancing with the Stars running our Department of Energy and telling us that we need to bring back a Korean-era law, war-era law, in order to subsidize coal. And we've got the Department of Interior, Ryan Sinke. Many of you may know who this person is. However, the decisions that Ryan Sinke made in 2017 actually catalyzed the outdoor community into action. This was a sleeping giant that said, wait a second, you're messing with our public lands, and mobilized them into action. Bear Sears, Escalante National Park, and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, they were all opened up for fossil fuel extraction. So really, when we talk about public lands, the conflict between public lands and the connection between public lands and climate is tight. It's basically the same battle. It's about what does the future American policy on energy look like. And we claim at Protect Our Winters, we're saying, hey, we believe that it's a renewable energy future where extraction from our public lands does not actually contribute to greenhouse gas emissions the way that it has. We know that globally, wind power could generate up to 40 times the electricity that we need. The price of solar has dropped 90% in the last 10 years. There's plenty of experts in the room that have talked about these technologies, but that is the technology of the future. So the people that we have in office right now are telling us, hey, we need to go back. And it's almost like saying, hey, we need to go back to driving gas-guzzling vehicles instead of looking towards the electric vehicles that, are going to be that are already affordable, that are going to be 93% of the market. All of the people that are making these decisions had to be confirmed by Congress. All of the people that were making these decisions had to go through the political process. And ANWR was opened up over 2 votes. 2 votes. At a time when elections are being decided at the margins, when we have, we think about Pennsylvania 970 or 870 votes. We think about Virginia a couple of thousand. What we believe is that this community, the outdoor community, can actually add the additional advocates needed in order to move the needle on this, but we need to inform them, and we need to actually mobilize them. So we believe that we do that by touching on that feeling that we all had at the beginning of this short talk, and by working with heroes in the community, such as Barney, who are demonstrating through their actions that not only can they be completely renewable powered in their efforts, but who also have a strong cultural influence and can relate to their followers based on values. And I'll let Barney talk a little bit more about it, and Gretchen talk a little more about those values when we start the panel. But also bringing these heroes and heroines and sheroes to places of power. This is Gretchen will tell a little bit more about her experience speaking in front of Congress. Protect Our Winters actually brought 5 Olympians earlier this year to do a congressional briefing on Congress. That congressional briefing was actually picked up by the mainstream media, over 750 outlets with a reach of over 200 million people, which is important because people need to hear about the issue so that it's important when they go to the polls. But also, it opens up the doors. Olympic medals, trips to the South Pole, and Everest summits open the doors of Congress. Congress people want to meet their heroes. That's my 8-minute mark. Want to meet their heroes as much as the rest of us do. And so this is Congressman Eric Paulson from Minnesota, who after meeting with Jesse Diggins, who questioned him on why he hadn't joined the Climate Solutions Caucus yet, 2 weeks later, he agreed to join the Climate Solutions Caucus. We're not saying that that particular meeting is what drove his decision, but we like to think that it actually nudged the timing of the decision. So overall, we're working on getting the outdoor community to be a strong voice in front of the mainstream media to say, hey, this $850 billion industry, this $17 billion snow sports community and the 25 million people who participated in snow sports between 2016 and 2017 care about this issue, and we're going to vote on this issue. We have about 100 influencers. All of the athletes in the front in that first video are POW athletes, and we're working with them to become climate advocates. But we're also spreading the message that all outdoor people can be climate advocates through the brand work that we do and through the brands that they support. So supporting brands that have a renewable, are taking a stance on renewables and on climate and have sustainability initiatives, who are offsetting their emissions. Patagonia, who's taking a very active stance on the policy, land policy issue. But most importantly, the reach that our athletes have reach the demographic that we most need. Millennials are the strongest voting demographic that has not yet shown its political power in this country. Over 100 million of them, and only 50 million of them vote right now. We only need to get a percentage of them to vote in critical states. And we're asking our athletes to help us mobilize their followers, of whom there are more than 12 million, in order to get them out to the polls. And the message that we're telling them is, you can choose between the past and the future. We're asking you to belong to the future. And we're asking them to do that by texting POW and by basically showing up at the midterm elections this year and at their local elections in November of this year. So in summary, that is what Protect Our Winters is about. We're trying to turn the passion of outdoor advocates or outdoor participants into effective climate advocates. And it's really a pleasure to have two of our strongest advocates here on the stage for a short panel discussion. So with that, I think I hit the 10-minute mark, and I'll turn it over. Barney, would you introduce us to what you're doing and what you've been doing and how you've been doing it?
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. It's my second time to AREDAY. It's great to see some familiar faces and lots of new ones. And yeah, I was stupid enough to walk to the South Pole earlier in the year, powered off renewable energy for the first time. We had a NASA-designed ice melting system that was using PV solar to melt ice into hot water, advanced biofuels made from compost, and lithium batteries to charge all of our solar. 2 months later, frostbite on my toes, just a wild experience. I made it to the South Pole on January the 16th and made a small part of history, and also made it the first net positive expedition from a carbon standpoint. We cleaned up 350 tons worth of CO2 associated with logistics. And that was the end of one journey and the beginning of another, which is really effectively building on that same model that Mario was just talking about. And it's called the ClimateForce Challenge. It's a 7-year campaign to clean up and be a part of reducing 360 million tons of CO2 before the year 2025. I'm going to achieve that through rallying people behind big level solutions, which we've heard a lot about, direct air capture, reforestation, waste management, kelp and algae farms, to name a few, cleaning up the ocean. I mean, a lot of big scale solutions out there, all with per ton metrics associated. An example, last week, I got $50,000 committed to Cool Earth, which is 100,000 tons worth of CO2. And really just using the likes of technology to make that happen. We heard from Danny about what he's doing with the ocean projects. I've also using virtual reality to engage eco-forum conferences, students, all kinds of people, touching them to places like Antarctica, Yosemite, on top of cliffs, everywhere in between, and just really creating a good thread about responsibility and having autonomy with actually being a part of the carbon neutral future. And that's the aim of the game, on bridging people directly to solutions. I think it's a bit of a gap with ESG and CSR, people writing $1 million to plant a million trees, and you never see that impact. And a big part of what we're doing is take people to a reforestation project, take people to a project that's cleaning up the ocean, take them to technology that's filtering CO2 directly out of the air, take them to a data center that's using 100% renewable in Iceland, providing an outdoor experience and just creating a little tangibility to a pretty big issue. And this is actually what pure CO2 looks like. Last time I saw Chip was in Iceland, and I actually got this there from a man called Julio, head of part of the Obama Street. Anyway, irrelevant. But this is CO2. 99.99%. It's got an oxide in it, but this is CO2, and I think having this here brings a tangibility to a really big issue, especially if we're talking about gigatons, millions of tons, even just offsetting your family. Like, what does 20 tons per the average American really look like? And I think having something that actually is tangible makes a difference. And yeah, just connecting people to these solutions, driving that campaign through the big solutions, also not forgetting that little lifestyle changes make a big difference. So within education, within office and business, and within lifestyle, having 5 solutions that we could all do today, whether that be eating a little less meat, considering single use, putting your air conditioner on 23 instead of 16. Lots of little things that we can implement into office, lifestyle, and schools, and just trying to make people feel that they have a responsibility, that it isn't the Paris Agreement and federal carbon credits and green bonds and all of this stuff, which is important, but never forgetting that a family who just wants to offset 20 tons, 30 tons, 40 tons, has that same ability within an application, within a process to do that just as easily as a company who wants to offset 100,000, 1 million tons of CO2, trying to make it just easy, accessible, and exciting. If people don't feel motivated to be in the outdoors, why bother protecting it? So that's my contribution and what I'm trying to do, and just trying to drive real change and make people feel hopeful that there's so much opportunity to what we're talking about in this room, and that's relevant to everyone from both an economic and a social point of view. So that's the aim of the game, and pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So Gretchen, we were just talking out in the hallway about the transition from Olympic athlete into the rest of life, and outside about the journey, like the hero is changing in the outdoor sports world. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about your own journey, but also how that those values have kind of drawn a through line in your professional career as well as in where you are now.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I wanted, at 7 years old, I decided I wanted to become an Olympian. And, it took a little while to get there. I got there, though. I got there. The first time I went to the Olympics was in 2006. And by the time I actually got to the Olympics, I was ready. I was prepared. I had hurt myself. I had had knee surgeries, I had fallen, I had lost, I had won, and I really tapped into sort of a bigger purpose around why I was doing what I was doing before I got to the Olympics. And that helped me when I got to the Olympics actually perform at my absolute best, and ended up winning a silver medal. Yay! But what happened after that experience, the US Olympians are always invited to the White House right after they go to the Olympics. And the day before we went and met the president, we had a speaker come and talk to us. And he said something that I'll never forget. He said, congratulations, you're all Olympians. You'll always be an Olympian. There's that expression, once an Olympian, always an Olympian. But this is not the end. This is just the beginning. What are you going to do with it? That was a pretty big thing for me to hear, because I was ready to respond to something bigger than just talking about my snowboarding, which by the time I actually got there, I was kind of sick of talking about my snowboarding. I wanted to talk about something bigger. I also had a fellow athlete, Joey Cheek. I don't know if any of you remember him. He was a speed skater. He went to those Olympics, and he won a couple medals. And really, it was so incredible, because I just wanted to be an Olympian. And I got there, and I won a medal. But he wanted to be an Olympian, and then he knew exactly what he was going to do with it as soon as he got those medals. And he turned around, and he donated his prize money to an organization called AREI-AREDAY. And that money that he donated to the organization, it was good. It was like $10,000 or $15,000. But more important was he was at the Olympics, and him donating his prize money to this organization created this crazy media storm where everyone wanted to know, who is this guy, Joey Cheek, and what is this organization, AREI-AREDAY? And that to me was just like, wow, this guy knows what he's doing. I want in on that. So for me, this was around the time where An Inconvenient Truth had just come out, and I was traveling around the world chasing snow, and climate change was something I was experiencing firsthand wherever I was going. And I decided to start using my platform as now an Olympian to talk about climate change, not as a scientist, but as a person who was experiencing it firsthand and traveling and seeing it around the world. And that was sort of the beginning of me becoming, using my platform for something bigger. I started working with POW in 2009. So from 2006 to 2009, I was involved in lots of different organizations. And I realized that in order to truly be effective, I needed to hone in. And I started working with POW because it was an organization that was bringing the whole snow sports community together under one roof. And I felt like I can be most effective working with this niche that is mine. Since 2009, we've really grown, and we've gone beyond just snow sports and now tapping into outdoor sports in general. But like Mario said, it's been a really cool experience for me. At 7 years old, I never imagined that I would be going to Capitol Hill and lobbying and talking in front of Congress and going to the COP21 to talk about an issue as big as climate change. But it's something I believe when you are willing to follow your heart and follow your passions, that bigger purpose comes along. And it's been fun to go to Capitol Hill with my medal. And it opens doors. These senators and congressmen who are climate deniers are willing to talk about things. And it's disarming. And we're able, because we're athletes and not scientists, we're able to talk to them at a level that they can, we're on common ground. So it's been huge. And then to use sort of my social media platform has been another huge way that I've been able to talk about climate change and climate restoration in a way that's really authentic, because what I've learned is there is no silver bullet. We need a silver buckshot. We need to incorporate the environment and being conscious environmental citizens into the fabric of our everyday life. And a really easy way we can do that as athletes is to talk about climate change in our Instagram and talk about what's going on in policy in a way that's really organic. It's educational, but it also shows everyone who follows us and the adventures that we're doing that part of being an outdoors person, part of being an Olympian, part of being an athlete is paying attention to the environment and paying attention to the policies that are going on around that.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen. I'd love to pick up on something that you mentioned, and it's the social media landscape.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit outside about how do you leverage not only your medals or your expeditions, but to become that bridge in topic between people who follow you culturally because they follow an outdoors culture into the climate conversation. I think Maggie Fox talked a lot about the importance of culture. I think famously Steve Bannon said politics follows culture, and right. And so I'd love to hear how you see yourself as bridges between your followers and the issue.
I think from my perspective, it's about trying to inject people who are following us, whether someone who has a passion for snowboarding or someone who has an intrigue within mountaineering or expeditions or just going on a hike with their family. I think we become an ambassador to do two things. It's first to inject like a baseline responsibility there, that if you are going out and climbing all 7 summits and doing yoga on top of mountains and having a fantastic Instagram feed and living an amazing life in the outdoors, you have even more of a responsibility than a hedge fund manager or someone working in an office job to give back to that place, because that nourishes you, that is your passion for the most part for people who are following these things. And I think it's like injecting that responsibility that you are a part of the problem and you are part of the inconvenient truth, but together through injecting solutions and making things very simple for them, you can transform that responsibility into convenient solutions and move slowly away from an inconvenient truth. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with awareness. Al Gore has done a fantastic job with that, but that time is over. We need to be making that responsibility trickle straight into impact, straight into solutions that are easy to understand. One click of a mouse button away, you join POW and be a part of a policy or a bill, or you switch to Ecosia browser on your laptop, and for every browse that you do, it goes towards planting a tree. Small and big things, and just injecting that sense of responsibility, because some people just really don't have it, and I feel like it just goes over their head when they hop on another plane to go on another fantastic adventure and to do all of these great things and to live an amazing life of adventure. With that becomes a cost, and I think it's our duty to be an ambassador to remind people of the responsibility to do something about that cost, and at the same time giving them solutions to act upon that today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think people want to act. I think that's the biggest question that everybody asks is, what can I do? I want to help. I want to be involved. And I think that's where POW has been so helpful. I mean, we have a team that it's their job to follow policy, and specifically around what POW is focused on. And we have people sending us emails saying, here's what's coming up. This policy is coming up right now. We need people signing this petition. And we can organically take that message and post it to our social media and give people, I think on Mario's presentation, there was the text vote, or you can go onto POW's website. It's super simple for somebody to be engaged in this way. And the more that they start reading about these policies, the more educated they become and start calling their representatives. So it's just a step-by-step process where the more you get involved, the more you want to get involved, the more curious you are, the more you're willing to start taking risks. I'm sort of the example of what POW is doing. I am the example. I started with them in 2009 and started doing these Hot Planet Cool athlete assemblies with middle schools around the country, and started feeling more comfortable talking about climate change, and that led to lobbying on Capitol Hill and then getting invited to COP21 to speak on behalf of POW at those negotiations. So it's just continuing to say yes, continuing to show up, and it's the same for people who are following me. I'm giving them the education and the opportunity to act, and they will continue it on in their own way.
And I think to add to that, coming back to what you said with why the Congress people welcome you to some extent, after doing my South Pole trip, going to the World Economic Forum or Forbes 30 under 30 or whatever it may be, you suddenly have an opportunity to give a human perspective on a really big problem, on a problem that's got so much information, got so much negativity, got so much everything. Suddenly there's a human here who's done some tangible real life stuff, who can bring a voice, and a hopeful voice, to hopefully make a little sense out of really big issues. And whether it be on social media or just having a conversation, I think it's important to inject that hopefulness and that good news story and the positive power of sharing a good news story, instead of flicking through your news feed and seeing nothing but negative codswallop. Let's be a part of making some nice splash and a good news stories.
Great, thank you. So I think we have to wrap. Thank you.
Thanks, Mario.
Thank you both. In parting, the one thing that I'd like to leave this audience with is, as any other community, the outdoor sports community, the outdoor industry community can be pretty insular, and there's not necessarily a lot of conversation happening between this group and the outdoor industry and the outdoor community, but we represent a group of incredibly passionate and talented individuals, companies, and followers who can really have an impact on this issue. And I just invite all of you to extend an arm and find out more about what the community, what the athletes, what the industry is doing on climate. Thanks.